I've structured it as a corporation where I'm at the top under Sammy the Bull. His son's running it at street level. I'm not handling anything anymore. I'm living in $1 million house on the side of a mountains. And the boss called me into his office the next day and said, "Look, Shaun, you're at a crossroads in your life right now." And I didn't listen to him. So I was born in a chemical manufacturing town in between Liverpool and Manchester. And I was a studious person, but my best friend was a maniac. He's dead now. His name's Wildman, R.I.P. Wildman. So we were in separate schools. In his school, he grew really big. He started picking school teachers up and putting them in rubbish bins. And they were so scared of him, they had him outside raking leaves with the caretaker. He had red dots in his head telling him to hurt people. And as a teenager, he'd go and fight the doormen at the bars in my hometown. And he'd show up at my house just black and blue like a train had hit him. But he loved it. So we were complete opposites. And this is important
Right.
because when he comes to America after his prison sentence, he opens the door into the world of gangsters for me. Because I'm not a gangster. I'm a nerdy guy who had gangsteritis, watched too many movies like Scarface, etc., and got excited by being around those types of people. So at the top of my town, we were just kids. There's a quarry. It's called Pexhill Quarry, and there's a tree overlooking the quarry. So me, Wildman, and Wildman's cousin Hammy would sit on this tree. We called it the thinking tree. And we'd be like, what are you going to do when you grow up, kind of thing. So Hammy would say to Wildman, "What are you going to do?" And Wildman would say, "I'm going to go to prison. I've got red dots in my head telling me to hurt people." And then he'd say to me, "What are you going to do?" And I say, "I'm going to go to America, make $1 million in the stock market, and fly you guys over." And Wildman, Peter, his name is, "When you come over, I'm going to get you a job as a wrestler. You're going to fight Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and the British Bulldog." This is how idealistic I was. But everything we prophesized on the thinking tree came true, apart from getting Wildman the wrestling job because he didn't settle down. So what happened was I went to high school in my hometown, Widnes, and I got interested in economics at a very young age. Like at 14, I was in this class and my teacher was giving me stock market classes on my own. 16, I borrowed £50, which is about $70 off my nan, doubled it in BT shares. So I was hooked on the stock market from this young age. I'm telling all my mates, "Go to America, fly you guys over," like I said earlier. I then went on to what's called sixth form college and did A levels, mathematics, physics, and economics. And then I went on to Liverpool University and did a business studies degree. Now, after I graduated, I moved to Arizona because I had aunts there. So, for example, when I was 16, I visited my aunt in Arizona. She changed my date of birth in my passport, so I was 21, and took me out nightclubbing to meet all these beautiful American women. And she's introducing me to them as Paul McCartney's nephew. So can you imagine? I'm getting all this attention. I'm thinking, when I finish at university, I want some of this. So that's what happened. I arrived in Arizona just with my student credit cards. I didn't have any money growing up. And Wildman goes off to prison. But 5 years later, I'm the top guy in the office. Wildman is finishing his prison sentence, and I fly him over. And that's when the mayhem begins.
What year was this?
So from 91, I arrived, and 96, 97, around then was when I flew Wildman over.
Okay. So what happened then? I mean, first of all, it's just because you were just good friends. Is that it? Had been friends growing up. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
he
mean,
sounds like
we were tight from childhood. There was a gang. I think we watched too many movies like The Warriors and The Wanderers, and we called ourselves the Sweats. This little gang in our neighborhood in England. And Wildman's brother was the boss of the Sweats. And Wildman was 3 years younger than his older brother. So the older brother would say, "Look, if you want to join the gang, eat that dog shit." And Wildman would eat it. And then he'd beat him up and say, "F off home. You ain't joining our gang." So he's really cruel. I splintered off from the Sweats to hang out with Wildman. I was 2 years older than him, which is a lot when you're a school kid. So I took him
right.
under my wing. That was before he just grew. I mean, when he died, he was 29 and a half stone and 6'2", which is like 29 and a half stone. Stone is like 14 pounds. So I get him a house share in central Phoenix near the George and Dragon British pub. thinking he'll chill out with the expats and have a Guinness. I'm still working as a stockbroker. Me and my girlfriend go over there a month or so after he's arrived, and a bunch of Mexicans answer the door. And I say, "Where's Peter?" And they're like, "Peter? There's no Peter here." I said, "Yeah, Peter, he lives here. Where's Peter?" And they start to get a bit sketchy with us and display guns. So me and my girlfriend start backtracking across the road. Well, man just strides over the road, all smiles. I'm like, "What's going on with your place? We could have got shot there, Peter." And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. They're the local crack dealers. They like to move around a lot. So I'm letting them stay in my place. And they're giving me as much free crack as I can do. I can do $100 crack rock in one breath. And it goes sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. And it calms down my red dots." And the guy at the back, he's a Colombian. He's running them. And he wants to invest in the stock market. And I'm like,
So you start working with him to invest in the stock market?
no, I'm like, "Peter, what are you doing, man?" I'm straight at this point, thinking, I'm just a stock market
Th
guy. I'm not a criminal, but that's going to rapidly change because Wildman's energy was too strong for me. So, a couple months later, I'm at the office again. My aunt calls the office and said, "Peter's place is headline news. There's yellow tape around it. Someone's been shot dead. You need to get your ass up there." So I sped up there, saw the police tape, saw the cops, saw the media, saw the crowd, sketched out, went back to work, went there later in the day when nobody was there. There's blood on the doorstep. I walk in. Peter sat in the living room with a very poker faced, gravedigger looking kind of guy who I learned was a homicide detective. After the homicide detective left, I asked Peter what had happened, and he said a couple had come over to buy crack, but the Mexicans had moved back over the street. So the female went to buy the crack. The male, he stayed with me and he had a gun on him. And I said, "Look, I'm from England. We don't have guns. Can you show me how guns work?" And he goes, "Yeah, the safety's on it." And he pulled the trigger and shot himself in the head in front of me and fell on the step. So he wanted to move out of that place. He was having nightmares, he said. He was uncomfortable there. So from the drug community, he knew a female. They were behind on the rent on the west side. So there was two females and a big male, this Chippendale style guy. He was a doorman. He was claiming to be gangster disciple. Anyway, I put the rent down, get a call from the landlady the next day. She says, "Peter's been evicted." I said, "Why has he been evicted?" "He beat his roommate up." "How do you know he beat his roommate up?" She said the roommate was seen running for his life through the apartment complex in the middle of the night with plasterboard powder all over his head and face, and there's multiple human head-sized holes in all the walls. Fortunately, he did that so fast, I was able to stop the check. And then one of the females, her boyfriend is behind on the rent at the Quadrangles in Tempe. Now, this is where the criminal enterprise starts. Because Wildman, wherever he moves in, he invites in all the homeless people, all the street people, Native American, transgender sex workers, gangbangers, Russian mafia, Italian mafia, New Mexican mafia, you name it. They're all there partying 24/7. And it's through this apartment complex now, Rancho Murrieta, I meet the New Mexican mafia. I meet people who are local ecstasy suppliers who become my smugglers internationally at the peak of things, and everything just builds from there.
So, okay, but you're a stockbroker. So why and I'm assuming you're doing well, right? You're
Yeah.
doing, at the very least you're doing okay. Like if you're not doing well, you're still a stockbroker. You're doing, good enough to be paying other people's rent. So why get involved with this guy? Why not tell this guy, "Look, you're on your own. You're way too much trouble. Like I can't be involved in this."
Because I had gangsteritis. I was
Right.
on drugs as well, meth and primarily. And the drugs was telling me, "You're in a movie now. You're like, this is like Pulp Fiction style. You're Mr.
Right.
Cool Guy." And I just didn't want the party to end. The alternative was in the office with a 6 o'clock in the morning sales meeting, on the phones all day, being in the rat race, and I had to make a decision. Now, there was a few stories at this inflection point where I should have saw the danger ahead of me. So I'll give you a couple of stories. Rancho Murrieta, massive apartment complex, Tempe, Arizona, ASU territory. By now, we've got some people are selling for me. We've got like stash house in there. We've got like a party house. So I'm at a party house and I meet this guy. He's got like stately sweatback silver hair. I don't know what he's about, but he's
Can I ask a question real quick?
yeah,
What's
yeah.
ASU? What's ASU?
Arizona State University.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. So it's like a lot of college people, sororities, that kind of thing. So I meet this guy with this silver sweatback hair, and we're all just chilling in this party. And another guy comes in. I'll call him G Dog, ruggedly handsome Mexican American Chicano guy, got the prison tats. He's supplying the white powder and the green, and people are smoking the green, just chilling out, listening to music. Cop walks in and says, I could smell it from outside. Nobody move. G Dog just whips his gun out, puts it in the cop's face, says, the only one who's not leaving is you, MF. Everybody run, and we all run off into the night. Now, I go to a neighboring apartment in the same complex that's got another big guy in it, Seth, who was almost as big as Wildman, who became one of my goons, and another guy called Fish, who's selling disco biscuits for me. So we go over there. Now, we're all crapping ourselves. We've never seen anything this heavy before in our lives. We're discussing whether to flush our stuff. Next thing, bam, 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 on the French window. It's G Dog. Let me in. And he schools us. He's like, look, the cops can't get a warrant that fast to come in. Turn the TV off. Turn the lights off. If they come here, nobody answer the door. You don't need to flush your stuff. And that's what we did. We all just crouched down and laid low. There was a knock on the door. They went next door and they got on their way. Now, obviously, it was mayhem. There was the police helicopter. This was going on for a few hours. But when all that chilled out, I took G Dog to a house I had in Central Phoenix to shoot pool and do lines. And that's what we did. And then at the end of that, he said, look, from now on, because you and your mates protected me, you and your friends protected me, me and my brothers have got your back. And I had no idea what that meant. A couple of months later, he invited me over to one of his brothers. And in my Locked Up Abroad episode, it shows this scene. We go over to the house. There's all these lowriders on the street outside. His brother answers the door, little fella bald, looking up at me with this mean face, like, who the hell have you brought over here? And then he hears my English accent. He's like, damn, you talk funny. I guess you must be from England. Come in and meet my homies. So I go into the living room. And there's all the biggest Mexican American guys I've ever seen. Wife beaters on, the chains, prison tats, looking at me like they want to eat me. I totally don't belong in this environment. They've got weighing apparatus, scales, slabs of the white, slabs of the Christina. They've got the green in there as well. They've got guns. And I see the biggest TV I've ever seen in my life, but I do a double take because I see on top of the TV that looked familiar. I was like, hold on a minute. I've seen one of them. Oh, yeah, it was in a Rambo movie. They had a rocket propelled grenade launcher on top of the TV. And then they had next to the TV, they had another screen showing all the traffic and comings and goings on the street so they couldn't be raided. So these are the guys who I ended up in business with for years, and I didn't know who they were until they got arrested 2 or 3 years later, and all their mugshots were headline news. But going back to the guy with the silver sweatback hair, I'm working in the office, stockbroker, and I get a call from Fish, and he's like, you need to grab Wildman and Seth and come over. There's a situation. And I said, well, what's the situation? And he said, I don't want to tell you on the phone. Just get them as fast as you can. So I go looking for Seth and Wildman, but they're collecting debts, crack debts for the Colombian in Central Phoenix. Seth, by now, he was a stockbroker. He's got so high on things, he's thrown a computer at our boss and got fired. And now he's just permanently hanging out with Wildman. And so I end up, it takes me about 40 minutes or so to get over to Tempe to Fish's apartment and Seth's apartment. Fish and his girlfriend Iris answer the door. Iris is crying, and I think, oh no. someone's assaulted her, and they want Wildman and Seth to beat him up, probably. So I'm like, what's the matter? And they won't say anything. The faces are just frozen. I'm like, what's going on? You got to tell me. Then I hear this noise. Coming from the other room. I'm like, what's that? And they're like, you best go look. They're too terrified to say anything. So I walk into this other room. The guy with the silver hair is stood giving orders to a bunch of Mexicans with cattle prods. On the floor is a hog-tied man with a rockabilly quiff. And when he gives the instructions in Spanish to electrocute him, they stick him with the cattle pods, and I'll never forget it. He rocks like a rocking horse, his quiff's shivering, piss shoots out of his dick, his eyes are almost bulging out of his head, but he's gagged. He's trying to say, but he's gagged. He just looks terrified. Now, I am equally terrified. Again, I've never seen anything this heavy before in my life. The older guy with the silver hair is looking at me like with this welcome to the family smile. I'm thinking if I show that I'm shitting myself in this situation, he's going to think I'm a liability. So I've got to come up with something fast. So I'm putting this smile on and I say, looks like you guys have got this situation under control. I'll tell Wildman, if you need any help, just give us a shout. But I've got to get back to the office. So I'm walking out there and I stop at Fish and Iris. Say, look, what's going on? And he says, as you know, I'm moving stuff for you. Well, I'm moving stuff for them as well. And that guy on the floor, he's one of my customers. He thought I wasn't in the house and he came and robbed it and we caught him. I called you. I called them because he robbed your stuff and he was trying to rob their stuff. But they got here first. And that's what happened. And all the way back to the office, it was haunting me because I thought that guy was going to end up dead. And they called his mates and they said to his mates, you need to pay 10,000, his roommates, or else he's going to get taken out to the desert. And they paid the 10,000 and they released him. And that's what happened with him. And there was one more little story from this junction where I had to decide what I was going to do. I was in the car park outside the stock brokerage, counting out cash on my lap. And the boss's secretary pulled in right next to me and looked over and saw all the cash. And the boss called me into his office the next day and said, look, Shaun, you're at a crossroads in your life right now where you can keep putting in this hard work and going higher and higher in your sales commissions, get that house in Paradise Valley that you've dreamed of, or you can go down here. His eyes widened like I was going to end up burning in the pits of hell. And I didn't listen to him. I ended up going down there. Now, Wildman, he became completely unhouseable on that first trip. He met a chick who was into getting her female parts tased. So basically, Wildman's party trick was he had a taser and he would say to the whole room, who wants to tase me or who wants to hit me in the face as hard as they can? And he'd sit there and people would line up to hit him and tase him and he'd just be giggling like his toes were getting tickled. This chick walks up to him and goes, that ain't shit. I taser my pussy. And she had a boyfriend with her and she sent the boyfriend off to demonstrate this. And she did it. She hiked the stuff up and she was doing it. And you could see all the blue bolts of electricity going up and down her lips. And it was love at first sight for her and Wildman. When the boyfriend came back, he said, she's with me now. we're going to come over and collect all the shit later on. But she's moving in with me. But they ended up like Bonnie and Clyde. They couldn't, no work would house them. No hotels would house them. They were robbing places, robbing restaurants. They got arrested. And he was living under a tree in Tempe Beach Park with a Rambo knife and a baseball bat. Some people were coming at the nights and bullying the homeless people, and he took his baseball bat to them, so he became king of the homeless people. But when they finally got arrested, the judge said he was a menace to society and banned him from America for life. And he doesn't come back into the story now for another 2 years because I started to smuggling him back in with like Mission Impossible style teams of people through Canada and Mexico multiple times. He keeps getting deported.
He keeps getting caught and deported, but he did come back in.
Yeah, I keep smuggling him back in, but he keeps he just goes on the rampage, doesn't he? And then he keeps getting deported. So anyway, he leaves back to the UK, and I've got this guy now called Acid Joey. So I met him at a rave in downtown Phoenix called Chupa, really like industrial area, a lot of crackhead zombies in the scene, walking around there and stuff. And it's really dangerous neighborhood. There was a drive-by shooting there, and a raver got killed. Anyway, I noticed this guy dancing a stocky Native American Navajo, and I'm thinking for him to move that fluidly, he looked like he belonged in music videos. He must be on some good stuff. So I waited until he was outside, and I was like, "Hey, can you help me get whatever you're on?" And he did, but he could only get like 50 to 100 of the disco biscuits from the local suppliers. So he found out where they were getting from out of LA. Now, I organized the purchase of 500 or 1,000, I can't remember exactly. 2 carloads of us went out to LA to this guy's house. Me and Wildman in my car, and Seth and Acid Joey in the other car. All those guys are dead now, God bless them. The guy's not there at the prearranged time. So Wildman's like, "What the hell making me wait like this? I'm just gonna kick his door in now and take his shit." And I'm like, "No, Peter, that's not good business. Let's just wait for him to come home." So he arrived home with a bunch of dudes straight out of that movie Point Break, Surfer Gangsters. Have you seen what they look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he's with a bunch of them. We pre-organized. I was the only one to go in the house. I said to Seth and Acid Joey, "Don't let Wildman come in. Just keep him under control here. If I don't come out in 20 minutes, then you guys can come in and rescue me, whatever. But give me, 15, 20 minutes at least." So I go in, and I meet the guy, and he gives me a Mitsubishi, and I chew it, and I know what a good pill tastes like. Should be 100, 125 milligrams of MDMA and clay, like the Holland press, and that's what he had. So I handed over the bills. He handed over the pills. Biggest bag I've ever seen in my life. Come out, get in the car with Wildman. I've got like a twin turbo Mazda RX-7, like out of Fast and Furious 1, like a spaceship, and it's got these fur seats. I've dropped this e-pill. I've got Sasha and Digweed's classic Renaissance CD playing, Bose surround sound, driving out of LA, and all of a sudden I could feel my head getting tickled by the fur on the seat, and I'm melting into the chair. This was before I was professional. I would never have done this later on, smuggling like this. I'm driving over 100 miles an hour, just just bumping my head to Sasha and Digweed all the way back to Arizona. And those pills, we sold them in one weekend. So that was the concluding factor. Then I was like, do I want to stay in the rat race working these long hours? Or am I just going to abandon all that slow and steady progress and just try and make money from the rave scene? And that's what I did.
What were you thinking? You could always go back to being a stockbroker, or you just thought this was the way to go, and I can make this work.
Well, my main thrust was on raves and but I was in the background day trading as well during the dot-com bubble. And it was so easy to make money in 1998, 1999. I did make a couple of million, subsequently lost it, but we can get to that part of the story. So I'm building up the criminal enterprise now while Wildman is away. So I've got G Dog, he's got my back. People know I'm associated with his brothers, so people are a bit intimidated. I've got Acid Joey, um, he's distributing for me. And then I meet a guy called Skinner. So Skinner, he's in the rave scene. He's on the crack and he's eating out of dumpsters. And everyone tells me not to trust him. They're like, don't let him in, don't give him a chance. But I was always kind of guy who'd be like, here's 100 pills. You could sell them and pay me back. Or if you're going to rip me off, you're probably going to want to leave the state. Because they had like 20, 30 guys, big guys, bouncers, who would handle that kind of a situation. So I didn't mind if someone ripped me off and left the state, but I would prefer if they did do good. And Skinner did good. He overtook all of my salespeople. I think he was selling more than all of them combined. He managed to get a house with his girlfriend and have a kid, and we were tight. We were like little brother and big brother, and we talked to each other with Clockwork Orange accents. But then what happened was, Wildman curb checked the guy. So a very tall guy, was bullying his brother in a pub, and Wildman took the guy outside, knocked him down, and his head landed on a curb, and Wildman just stomped on his head. So this guy's mouth went into the curb, and he was
Mhm.
instantly put into a coma. So Wildman had to leave the country in a hurry. And Skinner, in the meantime, this is a couple of years into my relationship with Skinner, he's now on the Christina, smoking it, smoking sherm sticks, smoking crack, and he's getting a bit paranoid, and he's kind of like scheming a bit as well. So I've got my eye on him. So when Wildman comes over, the first thing I do is take Wildman to Skinner's house to intimidate him. And, Wildman is a very scary person. It put him in check a bit, but he got jealous of the amount of time I was hanging out with Wildman. So he schemed again. And what he did was he waited until Wildman was in a deportation camp because in Florence. I'd brought Wildman's girlfriend over, Wild Woman, a tough scouser, which means a woman from Liverpool. And some of the co-defendants are more scared of her than him. The cops, even, she's a small blonde woman. The cops have got a video of her chasing Wildman down the street, trying to hit her with a big fan. So she was quite brutal as well. What happened was Skinner had this plot to firebomb Wild Woman's apartment while Wildman was in federal deportation. He then had some guys who were going to show up and offer to take Wild Woman to safety with her product, and they were going to jack her product. So all this went down. The firebomb comes right through the window and just misses Wild Woman's face. And these guys show up from the south side, these gangsters, and they're like, yeah, Shaun sent you. We're going to take you to safety. She can't get a hold of me. And she's like, in this Scouse accent, what the F do I look like to you guys? Do I look like I just got off the effing banana boat? I ain't getting in no effing car with no F people I don't effing know. And they're just looking at her like, this woman's crazy. So, yeah, so they underestimated her resolve. And she didn't get in the car with them. And we found out from a striptease lady that Skinner was behind it. So then Skinner was just like, Wildman wanted to murder him. And he said to me,
Mhm.
Shaun, you got to get me out of this federal deportation. I want to come back to Arizona. And the lawyer got him out, and I smuggled him back. And then he was just he had just had a one track mind then to murder Skinner. And I was like, look, Peter, we're ravers. It's all about love and peace. I didn't even have Wildman beat people up. He would just move in with them if they owed me money, because if he moved in with you, all your furniture and your TV was getting carried out and by the Mexicans and sold off to these mafia guys. Homeless people were chilling in there. Someone was in your kitchen cooking up the crack. There'd be striptease girls. It would just be non-stop insanity everywhere he went.
Mhm.
So people were terrified that he was going to move in with them. So I was like, Peter, we're not at the murder level, man. That's homicide detective stuff. If you murder Skinner, they're going to be all over us, and it's a death penalty state. What are you thinking? But he wouldn't listen. He would stay up for weeks on end smoking crack and meth, and his eyes would be completely red, and he looked like the devil. And there was a moment, Wildman never ever threatened me or scared me because we were just really tight, but there was one moment where he was on the edge. I had a bouncer called Rossetti, one of the Rossetti brothers, and he was a big guy. And I always would tell him Wildman stories, and he would always look at me like incredulous. And then Wildman came over, and Rossetti was like, God damn. When I met Wildman, he gave me a bear hug, and then he picked me up and threw me around like I was a rag doll. You're right, this guy is else. So me and Rossetti are in the front of the car, and Wildman's in the back. He's been up for weeks. And I look in the mirror, and I'm looking at Wildman's eyes, and he's just like that, just staring at me. I'm like, what's the matter, Peter? Is this bothering you? He's just looking at me. I'm like, what is it, Peter? What is it? 'Cause I'm thinking if he snaps, we're in trouble here.
Right.
And he's like, I know what you're up to. I'm like, what do you mean what we're up to, Peter? I know where you're taking me. Like, Peter, man, I love you. I'm your best mate, I love you. What's going on? "You guys are taking me out to the desert." Me and Rossetti just look at each other like, "Oh, shit." So I'm talking to Wildman, I'm like, "Come on, man," and Rosetti's like, "Come on, man, you know, we're your best mates," and we managed to calm him down, but what we had to do, we that happened multiple times when he was paranoid about other things and people, and we'd have to dose him with Xanax to knock him out from these
So he
multiple.
got paranoid. He thought you were taking him out to the desert to kill him.
Yeah, yeah, and he thought he was gonna have to take action to avoid that against us.
Mm,
So
okay.
we diffused it anyway with love, and we got him on Xanax as soon as possible to calm him down.
Hey, real quick, just wanted to let you guys know that we're looking for guests for the podcast. If you think you'd be a good guest or you know somebody, do me a favor. You can fill out the form. The link is in our description box, or you can just email me directly. Email is in the description box. So back to the video.
Now, this is also around the time it goes from in the beginning, right? When I was still a stockbroker and showing up at these grungy warehouses in my twin turbo Mazda RX-7, the raver kids would come outside and I'm playing Commander Tom and Sven Vath and pumping this dance music on my Bose. And the raver kids would be outside dancing around my car and asking me questions. And they started to call me the Bank of England. And then they started to ask me to invest in their rave party ideas. Now, these competing cliques sometimes had disputes. So me and Wildman would bring them in for a sit down. We'd mediate the disputes and make a decision. But through that, we incorporated all of the local people into the criminal enterprise. If you've got all the local people working for you, you've got it locked down. If anything
Right.
happens, that information flows to the top. So what happened was, first couple of years, it's all going smoothly. And then this new style of dealer shows up. These steroid head jock guys wearing the polyester shirts who didn't look like ravers, bragging they were the biggest e-barons in the world. And I'm thinking, who the hell are these guys? Stepping on my toes. Now, I'm married to a woman at this point, and we got married on the Las Vegas Strip. She was doing lesbian internet porn when I met her. She was a smart woman. She had a university degree. She joined a strip club actually just because she fancied one of the dancers just to seduce her, and she ended up with that girl. Um, when we got married on the Las Vegas Strip, I'll give you a story of how wild things were with her. She was like, "It's my wedding day. I want to go to a brothel." And I'm like, "Cool. Who am I to get in, the way of taking you to a brothel?" So I'm calling all these brothels, and they're all. I'm saying, "Look, I want to bring. It's my wedding day. I want to bring my wife along." And they're saying, these are gentlemen's only clubs. You can't bring women in." And I'm like, she's starting to pout. Anyway, on the way back from the little white chapel, someone gave us some kind of little magazine, and we're calling these numbers of. She says she's like, "We'll call a girl to the room," and there's numbers for girls in this magazine. So we call this agency, and I think they're going to shut us down again. And I say, "Look, my wife's bisexual. It's our wedding day. Do you have a bisexual woman who can come out?" "Yeah, I've got this brunette, blah, 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 $150 for the hour." So she shows up. And I'm thinking again, when I tell her what we want, she's going to shut it down. Because the thing with my wife was we'd have threesomes, but we'd only be receiving oral sex from the other person. Then she'd get rid of her, and me and my wife would have full sex. That was like her limit. So we explained this to the escort, and she's like, "Yeah, cool." She sees my wife has got the white powder, and on the countertop, the escort, and she's like, "Can I do some of the white powder?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure, but we're from Arizona. We've got connections in Mexico. It's really pure stuff." And she ignores us and just this massive ass line. So her and my wife get on the bed. They're first. I'm watching this stuff getting turned on. And then it's my turn. And she jumps up and she's off her face and she does another Master Blaster line. And I'm like, whoa. So by the time I get on the bed, she grabs my man parts with this iron welder's grip, giving it this. I'm trying to hold on for dear life because I've got to save it for my wife. It's our wedding day and all this stuff. I'm thinking of everything under the sun, so I'm not going to bust a nut. In the end, I called it quits. And she jumps up again, does more, and she starts telling us her life story. Gets photos out of her kids. She says she's new to the job. She's doing stuff she doesn't like doing. We're the coolest couple she's ever met. Can she hang out with us? And can she come back to Arizona with us? And my wife's looking at me like, get rid of her. So when she went to take a pee, my wife's like, either you get rid of her or I'm going to get rid of her. So when she came back, I said, look, you got to go. We'll hang out with you, but we've got stuff to do for now. And I got rid of her. My wife's like, yeah, the whole purpose of a hooker is you pay them so they leave when you finish. What the hell? So that was just an example of how wild my wife was. Now my wife had a bisexual relationship with another female in Tucson, and the woman she was in a relationship with was in a relationship with one of these steroid head people who were coming into the scene. So through the women, we arranged a sit down at Heart 5, like a nightclub bar kind of place in Tucson. Now, I don't know these guys, what their intentions are, who they are. So I take Rossetti with me. He's strapped. I say, look, if they try and kidnap me, just open up on the mofos. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not a gangster. To get my bravery up, I've drank a cup of GHB, so I'm feeling a bit crazy. Me and my wife walk in. Rossetti kind of shadows us in there. And my wife stays in the bar, and this guy called the Spaniard says to me, come through to like the VIP room. In the VIP room is his partner, this crime partner, 6.5-foot steroid head guy, blonde guy. And he introduces me to him, and the big guy just yells at everyone in the room to get out. Now, we're all about to sit down on the sofa, and I'm thinking, I got to do a bit crazy here, just to make these guys think I'm a bit loco. And I remembered what my grandfather used to do to me when he walked past me. He'd squeeze my knee just above the knee and make me jump. So as I'm sitting down with these guys, I squeeze their knee to try and make them jump. And they're looking at me like I'm nuts. Anyway, the Spaniard, he's like, English Shaun, you're a big name from the rave scene. We know you've been doing business for a while, and you've got a lot of the locals working with you. We're more new to the scene, but we're moving a lot of product. Why don't you work with us? Now, my guys were getting it from Holland, and they took a testing kit you could get from a website called Dance Safe. And like I said, 100, 125 milligrams of MDA, it come up like purple blue in the testing kit. These guys were selling colored pills. My pills were like this beige speckled press, which you knew was this quality Holland stuff. So I said to them, look, I've got a reputation for my pills. I don't want any of your colored stuff. Then the big guy jumps off the sofa. Who the F are you disrespecting our pills? One call to Sammy the Bull and we can have you taken out to the desert. I don't know if he's just blowharding or what. But in the end, the Spaniard calmed him down. He said, Shaun, look, he's a bit of a hothead. And he calms him down. He sits back down and we're talking. And I say to them, look, the demand is so high, we can coexist. It's not each other we need to worry about. It's the feds. Since you guys have been coming into the raves, bragging that you're the biggest e-barons in the world, going around, just lighting the scene up, the feds have been going through the car parks, filming people's license plates. The feds have been trying to set up deals, saying they're from out of state, and it's so obvious. It's not each other we need to worry about. It's the feds. So there was an uneasy truce with those guys. Coming out of that room, my wife was unconscious on the sofa because she drank so much GHB. We had to carry her out. Once we got outside, I'm like to Rossetti, they're saying they're with Sammy the Bull. And we knew from the news that Sammy the Bull was this formidable character, underboss of the Gambino crime family, had murdered almost 24 people. But we still didn't know whether they were just bragging about that or whether it was true or not. So later on, I learned that under Sammy the Bull, his son's running it at street level. Now, there's a guy called Mike Papa. He's got a ring in competition with mine. And Mike Papa brings in Gerard Gravano and Karen Gravano. So they're the ones who are doing everything at street level. The old man, Sammy, he gives his son some advice and he invests in the ring. And the cops catch him, the son asking his dad for money. He says, I need money for gas. Yeah, I'll give you money for gas. And they use that against Sammy later on. But Sammy had no idea what was going on at the street level. So what happens next is there's various factions of the Gravano enterprise. And one of the factions, we don't know who they are at this point in time, contacts Skinner pretending to want to buy a large quantity of pills. They get Skinner to go to a nightclub in Scottsdale. They take him into the men's room to do the deal. They smash his teeth out and take all of his pills and all of his money and his gun. So he comes to me then saying, look, I've been jacked. Now, I've always thought to myself, I've got a shield against the cops and against jackers because by the peak of it, I've structured it as a corporation where I'm at the top. I'm not handling anything anymore. I'm living in $1 million house on the side of a mountain, Sinvacus, Tucson, where Paul McCartney is a few miles down the mountain range from me at this point, in a gated, guarded community, because things have got so heavy. So Skinner, he's had his teeth knocked out. After that, that was when I moved. I've got a guy called Cody Bates, also dead right now, my right-hand guy back then, because he was sensible. He didn't take anything. He kept sober. He's rented an apartment just for the cash and the product. He does the rounds for the heads of each faction. And then the heads of each faction hand over the bills. He re-ups them, puts the money in the stash house. If there's any problems, G-Dog and Wildman can get involved at that point. But generally, things ran pretty smooth. So I've got all these heads of the factions as my shield. I'm thinking if my shield ever gets pierced, I'm next, which is why I moved to this gated, guarded house. We had crime family dinner every month in these steakhouses. And, it was all. And then below the heads of the factions, they've got the street people. And so it's like there's 3 or 4 levels from me bringing it in. Also, at the peak of it now, I've lost a few people at airports. So I move operations through Mexico. I lost a guy called Fuzzy Chris at an airport in Phoenix. He's dead now too. God bless him. And I lost.
Do you have anybody in this in that's still alive in this whole thing? I mean,
most of
and
them.
how are these people dying? Is this natural causes or are these like
lifestyle choices? Wellman died 2 years ago from multiple organ failure. He was only in his 40s from all the stuff he'd done over his life. I mean, when he got arrested, he had to put a stent in his heart right away. During his first trip to Arizona, he would go and walk around for days and dehydrate and end up in hospital, things like that. He just didn't care. I remember once he was in hospital and he had all the wires on him and the cables and the monitors and stuff. And he asked me to give him an e-pill. And I thought he was going to put it in his pocket and munch it when he got out. And he just popped it right away in the hospital and all the monitors started. And we all had run out of the hospital. So he lived fast and hard. And that's the lifestyle he chose, just to burn the candle out. So he died. If people want to check Wildman out, he was my co-host for a couple of years on the channel. There's hundreds of videos of me and him. And he's a maniac. He will just say anything, and people loved him. And he would sit down with the gangsters we were interviewing and stare them right in the eye. And it's like real recognizes real. It was some really iconic moments of Wildman and these people. He was funny guy. So that was Wildman. Seth was a stockbroker. He was doing really well. When Wildman came on the scene, Wildman, he started doing meth with Wildman. The Wildman had a thing called purification, whereby anyone who was living a straight life would come into his orbit and leave that orbit completely transformed into a criminal, drug-addicted life. And he would laugh when these people were completely purified. So that was one of his early purifications was Seth. Seth went from wearing these smart suits to ripped T-shirts, collecting crack debts for the Colombians in central Phoenix with Wildman in these dangerous environments. And I love Seth to death as well, man. Both those guys would have took a bullet for me. We had some really great times together. But Seth, I think he damaged his heart from doing these drugs. And Seth died about 5 years ago. He did have, before that, he had a thing called a bradycardia. And things were going wrong with his heart. So he died about 5 years ago. Again, he must have only been in his 40s. Really sad, because he was married, had a kid. Acid Joey, he was called Acid Joey because he could do like 20, 30 hits on the weekend and still function. I'd do one and I'd be up for days. That's why he got that name. He liked his cat, and I don't know whether he'd been on cat the particular weekend he died, but he was found dead in the bottom of his swimming pool with all of his clothes on. Yeah, and then Cody Bates, he was the sober one. That's why I had him doing the rounds, having the stash house, running this. He'd babysit us when we were all off our faces. And he was a really caring, trustworthy person. Cody Bates, when we all got arrested, he did say he was suicidal when I met him. And he said we became his family, and that stopped him from killing himself. But when we all got arrested, he got so depressed, he went straight onto the brown stuff that you inject, the Mexican stuff.
Mhm.
And he ended up getting put in a rehab by his parents, and it was a Scientology rehab. And they put him on a medication that had a side effect of suicidal thoughts, and he hung himself. And if people want to Google that, they can Google Courtney Bates and look at that whole case, because the parents ended up suing the Scientologists over it and got a 6-figure settlement, I think. Now, that is just 5 of them. I think there's about 15 of them have died. Since then. But going back to where I was, I'm in the $1 million house on the side of the mountain. I've got my wife who's crazy as well, and we're reinforcing each other's insane behavior. We've got this new type of dealer is on the scene, and I go for a night out, just chilling in a gay bar called the Crowbar. Got G-Dog, got Wildman, got Wild Woman, got a few other people in our crew in there. And then they advised me to leave. They said the mood had changed. They got a bit sketched out. And we left. And that was it. We just didn't think about that again. Years later, in prison, I meet Sammy the Bull's son. And Sammy the Bull's son said they had a bounty on me. And a striptease girl called it in. And they jumped in their car with their guns. And they were on the way to come and kidnap me and take me out to the desert. And they were going to hold me as hostage to get a ransom paid. If the ransom wasn't getting paid, they were going to eliminate the competition. And Sammy the Bull's son tells this story in the documentary we've got coming out with Sammy the Bull. They told me it was going to come out in August on this huge American network, so hopefully it will, because it's a massive production.
Which network?
Can't say because of the contract that I've signed.
Right.
Yeah, but they've got 100 million subscribers or whatever, paying people that watch the network. Yeah, it's massive. When I told my mom some people were coming to the house to film us, she thought like a couple of people were going to come. There was trucks of people. Traffic had to be stopped. There was like 20 plus people in our house, and they filmed at the Thinking Tree. People are already starting to do pilgrimages to the Thinking Tree, but this really will open it up. They filmed at Wildman's grave. I was crying my eyes out. But yeah, going back to the story then. So there's a story arc, isn't there, when you see all these movies like Scarface, like Blow, where there's the glitz and the glamour and the women and the partying, and it's great. But you're always trying to get back there, because when you start out taking substances, the pleasure's very high in the beginning, the side effects are very low. But over time, that pleasure's slipping down, and the side effects, the paranoia and everything's rising. You're trying to get back to square one. So you're taking more substances. You're moving on to harder substances. By now, at the peak of it, I'm like going out on the weekend on Ket, Xanax, GHB, assorted Mexican pharmaceuticals. I don't even know what they are half the time. We are having after parties at the Scottsdale Hilton Villas. We close all the curtains, take all the paintings down, and every single painting has got a pile on it of like or the white powder, and I remember once we had DJ Kyoki over, and he passed out in the bath. We had to smash the door in. And my other mate, Mike Hot Wheels, was there. He went to the fridge. He opened the fridge to get a drink, and there was a Mac 10 in the fridge. And he's like, "What is going on with you guys?" So this is what we were like at the peak of it. We're into that middle section where we've gone beyond the glitz and the glamour. So now people are getting sketched out. There's guns involved. The competition have moved in. The feds have moved in, and it's only going to end in one way. I'm losing people. I'm losing smugglers. So I informed all of my smugglers never ever to smoke weed or carry weed or go around weed smoke if you're going on a mission. So Cody Bates takes his best mate to Holland. I'm going through Holland now because I've lost a couple of people domestically. And I went to someone who's an expert in smuggling routes, a lawyer. And the lawyer says, look, you need to start bringing it in from Europe to Mexico. So I invested in property in Puerto Penasco, Rocky Point. And we've got people going from Hermosillo Airport, and then they're going over to Mexico City, and then they're taking Air France over to Paris, and then they're getting the train over to Holland, and then they're coming back. And when they get to Hermosillo, we're bringing them down to Rocky Point, changing the loads into SUVs with like ASU stickers on them, and diving tanks, and tourist and student kind of bric-a-brac. This was before 9/11, so don't try any of this now, folks. Back then, you could put thousands of pills in pillowcases and just put them in your luggage and get on the plane. Or if you wanted to be more secure, you could put them in computer towers. The most we ever had was 40,000 pills brought in computer towers. And bear in mind, they're going for $25 to $30 a pill. But because I am fronting them to my heads of factions, say at 10, 5,000 at 10, my cost is about $3. The cost of the mission, getting him in Holland, all that kind of stuff, legal costs, $3. So on a 40,000 pill mission, I'm making 7. Still, about $250,000. But I'm not making the 25 to 30. That's all broken down, from there. So
listening to you makes me want to watch the movie Layer Cake.
Yeah,
You ever see that?
love Layer Cake. I've watched it twice. Yeah,
Oh, it's great.
So-
Sorry, go ahead.
So
Sorry.
Cody Bates takes one of his best mates, a total straight edge guy, never done a crime in his life, a lovely guy, really just gentle spirited fellow. He takes this guy to Holland. It's the guy's birthday. So Cody Bates buys him some hydro. The guy is so naive. He thinks to himself, I'm in Holland for the first time. I've got hydro from here. I'm going to take this back to America to show all my mates. They've got 10, 20,000 pills. They get to a checkpoint in Paris. Now, every sniffer dog in the world can smell the green. It takes specially trained beagles to smell. So the sniffer dog doesn't smell the E. It just walks right up to him, puts its paw on him, and he's a bust. Cody Bates is behind in the queue. They've at least had the smarts to go separate. He sees this, goes to the toilet, and flushes all of his stuff, and he gets through. Now, everybody who worked for me had legal benefits. And by that, I mean we assigned them a lawyer right away. We primarily had people who had no criminal history. And we'd say, look, you've got no criminal history. You've got a lawyer. You've got bail money. You tell them you're going to exercise your right to remain silent unless your lawyer is present. And they're going to have to bail you out at some point if you keep your mouth shut. And I got schooled by these new Mexican mafia guys earlier on. Because when I would go over to their place in the very beginning to do what I was doing, they said to me, Shaun, if you leave our place and get pulled over and the cop says they want to search the car, they have to have probable cause. And if they don't have probable cause, if you give them permission, probable cause is waived, and you've opened yourself up. If they find anything, then you're shit out of luck. Tell them, if they ask you to search the car, that you're in a hurry and you don't want to search the car. And there's nothing they can do unless they've got probable cause. If they search it then, it's the fruit from the forbidden what is it, fruit from the forbidden tree kind of scenario. So I knew all this, and I passed this down to the people I hired. The New Mexican Mafia also said to me, Shaun, if things really hit the fan, use our lawyer, Alan Simpson. He's pricey, but he's a loophole lawyer, and he'll get you the best deal possible. That comes into play later on. So anyway, I lose my guy in France, and illegal benefits come into effect. We can't bail him out. The lowest sentence we get him is like 2 to 3 years. He did his 2 to 3 years. He buckled down, and he ended up speaking French when he got out. Yeah, so things are getting shady back in Arizona. One of my guys is double dipping. He's playing both sides. So he's getting product from me, and he's getting product from Sammy the Bull's crew. Now, he takes money from one of my customers and goes and gets product from Sammy the Bull's crew. And as he's leaving with the product, he gets pulled over, and the feds take the product, but let him go suspiciously. That's a warning sign right there. Anyway,
Right.
our customer comes crying to Wildman and says, look, he just took the product, took the money, and he lost the product. What am I going to do? So Wildman and his fists were like twice the size of mine, and it was just all.
I'm sorry, but it wasn't your product.
No. He took cash from one of our customers.
Oh, okay.
Bought and got the product from the Bulls crew, but then got pulled over, leaving the apartment, and the police took the product. So I
think telling you is a mistake.
We've got a disgruntled customer now. Yeah.
Okay.
So the disgruntled customer comes to us to rectify the situation. Now, Wildman's fists are twice the size of mine, and they're just all human teeth mark scars all over them. And he punches this guy so hard in the face that his tooth gets so deeply embedded between two knuckles, he can't get it out. And he's got to go to hospital. And Wildman never goes to hospitals. He hates going to hospitals. The first place I rented him, he had these heroin-using roommates. And he didn't mind that, but he warned them not to leave their needles out. And they kept leaving the needles out. I think he stepped on one. So I came over there during a lunch break. This is when I was still a stockbroker. And he was dropping the TV on one's head and picking it up, and dropping the TV on the other head and picking it up, and dropping the TV on the other head. But I noticed his ankle had expanded and it was all coloured. And I said, what happened, Peter? He says, I dropped the TV on my own ankle at one point, but I won't go to hospital because I'm self-healing. So he has to go to hospital to get this tooth out. It's just properly stuck. And the nurse is like a really, let's say, abrupt character. And she's like, how did you do that? Well, I was like, how the F do you think I did that? And she's like trying to put him in check. So they're having this conversation, and she gets the tooth out, and he's supposed to get stitches, and he just walks out the hospital, and he goes home, and he's got fishing wire in his place, and he just ties it up with fishing wire. Wild woman is in Arizona now. She's been deported and smuggled back in. So the wild ones are going crazy. Wild man is trying to kill Skinner. They're so hot, I send them to Mexico. I figured I got to get them out of Arizona because they're going to bring everything down. They're just like, they won't be quiet. They don't know the secret of being on the down low. So my mates say, if Wild Man behaves in Mexico like he's behaved in Arizona, the Mexicans will kill him. Now, it was very hard to communicate with people in Mexico. I had banned mobile phones because of the nature of what we were doing. I would use a pager and go to a payphone to make my calls. So Cody Bates takes the wild ones down to Mexico, rents them this really nice house that's like a new build. Now, I've given money, I've given product, and just left them at it. I don't know how they're doing because I've got no way to communicate with them. So another one of my guys goes down a couple of weeks later to bring him more money and supplies. And he comes back terrified. And he says the Mexicans have killed the wild ones. I said, what do you mean the Mexicans have killed the wild ones? He says the house has been completely blown up. windows smashed out of it and everything. They're dead. They're gone. And I'm thinking the wild ones are indestructible. This can't be the case.
Right.
So I had a guy working for me. He was an ex-military sniper, Frankie Flowers. And he was a Chicano. He could speak Spanish. So he went down there to get to the bottom of things. And he came back and he's like, look, Shaun, I found the wild ones. They're fine. Now, I abhor domestic violence, but the wild ones were like cave people. Their relationship was based on domestic violence. Like,
Right.
he'd like hit her. She'd grab a knife and stab him in the belly. And then the next day they'd be like, love you. And it would just go round and round in circles. So in this new house, they'd got in a fight and decided to stop for a smoke break. Now, the gas pipes aren't as strong as they are in the USA. And when he'd thrown her against the wall, she cracked the gas pipe. So as they light up their cigarette, this blue wall of flame just appears on the carpet. Wild man grabs Wild Woman. They get out of the house just in time with these windows exploding. And the fire engine that came, it was like something from an old black and white movie, like with one of those things on it. It took a while for the fire engine to come. And then, so that property was burnt up. I get them a beachfront condo next, which they end up destroying, and they end up living on the beach by the end of it. So we've got it was the mission of the 40,000 pills actually coming in the computer towers, and one of my smugglers, I'll call him Grady. He was a good guy. He was one of my bouncers. He was into his guns. He actually was testing his gun. He shot the tip of one of his fingers off. So Grady, we're waiting for him to arrive with the 40,000 pills. And I'm driving around with Wild Man. He gets some crack, like £5, £10 of crack, I don't know what it is, off somebody. And we go back to the beachfront condo. Beautiful place, swimming pool outside. You can look out on the Sea of Cortez and see the whales and the whatever. And Wellman opens his wrap of crack, and his eyes just like he wants to kill someone. This isn't real crack. This guy's ripped me off. I'm like, Peter, we're waiting for 40,000 pills. Chill out, man. No, take me back. Take me back to this guy. I'm going to set this straight. If he doesn't set it straight, I'm going to kill him. I'm like, Peter, we need to lay low right now. We've got 40,000 pills coming. I don't care if it's $10 or 100,000. Nobody rips me off. Take me there now. Anyway, we get in the SUV. The dealer is on the high street. There's cops on both sides of the street. There's some cops right by the dealer. I'm like, Peter, don't do anything crazy, man. We don't want to get in trouble with these cops. And he's like, no, I won't hit him. And he uses the momentum of the vehicle as he's approaching this guy to smash him in the head and knock him out against a pole, like a bus stop pole. And the guy falls down and he jumps out and he's mauling the guy like a burr. So I just drive off. I've already warned him. I don't want to be in the mix with the cops in this. I just drive off. So I think this is a bust. I get back. There's Wild Woman. There's Cody Bates. I say, look, he just smashed this guy in front of the cops. We're going to have to bail him out from the jail. Here's some money, Cody. Go and get him, blah, blah, blah. And we're discussing our options. Then Wild Man just walks in. He's like, what the F did you drive off for? Leave me there. I said, Peter, there was cops on both sides of the roads. I thought you were going to get... he tells me that he's been giving the cops in LSD, and he's in with them, and he's it got to the point where when I was going down there, cartel guys were driving Wild Man around in military jeeps and calling him El Oso, the Burr, because of his fighting style. So he paved the way. If you're running stuff through Mexico, you've got to be okay with the locals, including, they call it a plaza, don't they? If you're trying to get anything through a plaza, the locals are going to report that to the top, and you're going to get jacked, or really bad things can happen down there. So the guy with the 40,000 pills, he eventually arrives, and the girl I've paid to smuggle them back to Arizona. I know she's a big mouth, and she's going to tell everyone, even though I told her not to tell everyone she's smuggling them. So at the last minute, I tell her she's not smuggling them. I've already got someone else ready that nobody knows about. The girl did get stopped, not the one with the pills, the loudmouth. The other girl got through. But that batch, that was like at the peak of the importation. That batch, some of it got robbed, some of it just got lost to stupidity. It was like no matter what I was attempting at that point, it was all sliding downhill. The wild ones ended up sleeping on the beach down there in Mexico. They got a local guy to go on a smuggling mission, and he could speak fluent Spanish, but he got high on, and pills were dropping out of his luggage, or because he was using the supply. He got busted in Mexico City. His legal benefits came into effect, but the Mexican cops kept calling us, asking us for more and more. So we had to cut that off. I had another smuggler. She got high on meth and got sketched out and just dumped her load at Hermosillo Airport. It was just like one bad thing kept happening after another. And the wild ones are like, bring us back into Arizona. We've had enough of it down here. So this was just before 9/11. They never would have got back in if it was for 9/11. And I got them a house in Tempe. I'm asking them to chill out. They're right back at it. Wild man's on the crack, staying up for days, paranoid, thinking people are going to come to kill him. And he's just going on walkabouts for days, waking up in complete strangers' houses. And he was on Skinner again. He wanted to murder Skinner. Now, when I am in the jail, the head of the Italian mafia, he asked me, who do I want as my cellmates? Because this guy was running it. I'm going to get to the jail stuff later on, but this story is important to do with Wildman and Skinner. So the head of the Italian mafia was outside when we were all locked down, smoking with the guards and giving them orders. And I say, yeah, I want this guy called Joey Crack as my cellmate, and Grady, the guy who brought the 40,000 pills, and they moved them in. So every night, Joey Crack, he's this really, and he's dead as well. Joey Crack, he is telling us all stories about the wild ones, especially Wildman, because he hung out a lot with Wildman on the streets. And all these Italian mafia guys are like in awe of these stories of Wildman, and they ask for me to arrange a meeting with Wildman at Catholic Mass, and I'll get to all that later on in the second part. But the point is here, Joey Crack tells this story to us one night about that he's at Skinner's property. Skinner is smoking sherm, crack, and he's got so sketched out because Wildman's coming to kill him. He's gone to the cops. I do find out that 10 people have gone to the cop through my grand jury indictment, but none of them knew anything. One of them was the owner of the beachfront condo that the wild ones destroyed. A couple of them were working for Sammy the Bull's crew, so they didn't know the inside scoop on my organization. But Skinner knew everything from the inside, and he got so scared he went to the cops and left the state. But Wildman didn't know that. I didn't know that. So Joey Crack goes to Wildman's place. I'm sorry, Joey Crack goes to Skinner's place. And as he walks into Skinner's place, a giant hand just grabs his neck and squeezes it. And he looks into the face of Wildman, and he sees these blood-red devil eyes, sweat just dripping down this guy's face, and just looks completely demented. And he starts screaming, "It's Crack! It's Crack! Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" And he looks, and Wildman lets him go. And he looks around the room, and there's every weapon known to humanity. Wildman wasn't allowed around guns because of what happened previously. Everyone was instructed never to ever allow him around guns. He wasn't allowed to drive cars either. I warned everyone never let him drive a car because he did it in England. He just crashed it right away for the fun of it. Rossetti didn't know. And Rossetti let him drive his car, and he did try and go into oncoming traffic, and Rossetti just pulled it back in time. So Wildman wasn't allowed guns. But in Skinner's flat was like hammers, pliers, baseball bats, knives. So, he's going to do a proper number on Skinner. And Wildman then was just frustrated because he couldn't find Skinner. I met a woman. She was scared of my friends. I fell in love, and she was like, Shaun, your friends are scary. You come and visit my family members and my dad, and I don't want them knowing where we live, and it's really bad what you're doing. And the person who told us about the smuggling, the lawyer said that they had a contact in the DEA, and the DEA were hip to us, and I needed to be not doing anything. So with this woman,
Where's your wife?
all right. So I was married 3 times. My wife, we broke up because everything just got too out of control between us, and it just wasn't working. And I met this other woman. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we moved into an apartment in Scottsdale. I'm back to trading the stock market online. I'm going to the gym, and I'm not letting people know where we live. I've quit the importation, but I haven't addressed the root causes of why I'm getting involved in drugs. I didn't understand the psychodynamics of any of that. Why am I addicted to this lifestyle and doing all this crazy stuff? That took years later of therapy. So I'm still sneaking off. I'm leaving my girlfriend Claudia at home, and I'm sneaking off on the weekend to party with G-Dog and Wildman and get high. Because I just can't quit. I can't quit. Yeah, the lifestyle. And then it was May 16th, 2002 is when there's the knock on the door. Yeah.
What I mean, was this like a nice knock where they asked you to come downtown, or is this like a whole group of, are there 24 SWAT members? And how had you been indicted?
So I didn't
Did
know it.
this just
I didn't know
oh,
what was going on. I'm on the computer, and I just hear bam, 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 bam. Tempe, please, you got a warrant, open the door. So I don't know whether it's the cops or people pretending to be the cops coming to rob me. So I run to the window. Entire complex is surrounded. And I'm thinking, oh my God. I go through to the bedroom to my girlfriend, and we're like, right, we better let him in. So we're walking through the living room, and then just door just flies off the hinges, bangs against the wall. You know what it's like.
yeah.
They've got the protective glass visors, and the eyes, they just got that intense look like if you F around, your life is over in seconds. And they're screaming, get your hands above your effing head, get on the effing ground now, don't effing move. So you drop quite fast. It's almost like it goes in slow motion as you're looking at them fan out in front of you. Then you drop fast, and the detective, who was my nemesis, I learned from the police reports later on, he'd been sitting next to me in restaurants and everything for years. The detective just hoists me up by the handcuffs, and he's like, English Shaun, you're a big name from the rave scene. We finally got you. And I start screaming, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, love. I'm exercising my right to remain silent, love, to my girlfriend. And they just drag me down the stairs in my boxer shorts. They get some clothes out of the dirty laundry basket and let me put them on. And then they put me in a cop car. And it's like a scene. It is like a scene out of a movie. So there's this cop with the aviator sunglasses and the chewing tobacco. is listening to 98 KUPD hard rock. I'm just looking out at the desert. Like that movie Electrical Hiding in Blue, it's like that. I'm looking out at the desert, and there's just so many things going through my head, Matt. I'm thinking, one side of me is thinking, my karma's finally come home to roost. But the other side is thinking, hold on a minute, I've quit the importation. There's nothing in the house. What can they do? Maybe they're going to have to let me go. So
Right.
I'm torn. Now, we go to Tempe Police. They're the main instigators of this. And they've set up like this outdoor like prefab things to process us. And that's the first place that they take us is a process at these prefabs. And then they put us in Tempe jail. So I'm in the Tempe jail cell contemplating things. And then more and more co-defendants start showing up. I'm thinking, oh my God, this isn't just me. Because I planned it whereby if I get arrested, hopefully my mates are going to bail me out. I even flew people over from England, put money in their names in the stock market, thinking I could use that money to bail me out. But I didn't know this yet, but the cops had put a NetBus Trojan horse virus into my computer. I saw in the police paperwork it was Department of Justice thing because the feds were involved in the beginning. It was a multi-agency investigation, like with the Gravanos. And they'd seen everywhere I had my money through this NetBus Trojan horse, and everything was seized that day of my arrest. So as people are showing up in Tempe jail, I'm starting to realize how big a shit I'm in because the case was expanding in front of my eyes and the amount of money they'd spent on the arrests. So Cody Bates, he'd been out, just doing his thing in his car. He was on the freeway and he noticed a helicopter. And this was in the Mesa, Tempe side of Phoenix. And he's like, this is so weird. It's like almost like the helicopter's following me around. So he drove all the way to the west side of Phoenix, and the helicopter was still there. So he drove back to the east side, and the helicopter was still there. And he's thinking, oh my God, this is properly like a scene out of Goodfellas. He's telling me all
Right.
this. He's on the freeway, and all these police motorbikes just completely surround him and take him off the freeway. Then I've got a DJ who was one of my distributors. He shows up. So this DJ was a guy that Wildman moved in with previously. And while many houses either blew up or ended up on fire that Wildman moved into, not on purpose, just through mayhem. And with this DJ's house, he moved out. Most people moved out after Wildman moved in, but his house ended up on fire. Wildman said he'd been tweaking and messing around with the electrical stuff in there. And then he went to bed, went to sleep. And he said he was asleep and he was looking at the ceiling. And it was like he was in a Pink Floyd video. He just saw all this smoke. And he just was smiling at it, thinking he was in a Pink Floyd video. And then he realized the place was on fire. And when I went to pick him up the next day, the fire engines have been and all that. And he was just sat on this wall, looking despondent, covered in soot. But yeah, so this poor guy, this DJ, he owed us money. That's why Wildman ended up moving in with him. It was his first day. He'd gone straight edge as well. And it was his first day raising money for the Republican Party. And he was at his new job when the cops showed up. So I'm hearing that. There ends up about 13 co-defendants in the first group. Bear in mind, at the peak of it, I had about 200 people working for me. Over 100 of them get arrested over the course of months in groups because there's so many. But there's about 13 in this first group, and they're all getting processed at Tempe. But we've got to get shipped over to Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail. Now, Claudia, my girlfriend, she was getting questioned in Tempe police station. And they were asking her about a trip to the dentist. We went to Tucson where my dentist was. And they thought we were doing smuggling. And they were like, these are very serious charges. You're facing a lot of time. And while man's walking past, he's in the corridor, and the cops are kind of escorting him. And he kind of tries to get into the room with Claudia, and he goes, "Serious effing charges, my effing ass. Don't listen to them, Claudia. Daft pig fucking bastards." And they push him on to keep going. So anyway, we're all in the van. They did let Claudia go. She didn't know anything. They do criminalize her later on to stop her from visiting me, but I'll get to that story. So now there's 13 of us in the van. There's me, Wild Man, Wild Woman. There's Cody Bates. There's Frankie Flowers. There's a chick called ADD. There's an Asian chick. And there's a black guy as well who did smuggling for me. And we're just all talking about how our days have been and all the craziness. And we get to Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail intake. It's like
And Sheriff Joe's the one that makes everybody wear like striped pajamas. I mean, striped the jumpsuits, the striped stuff, striped, and he makes pink underwear and like puts everybody in camps, right?
yeah.
Or I'm sorry, in tents or something. He didn't want to spend money for a new jail, so he put everybody out in there in tents, no air conditioning, that kind of thing.
So in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail, that's the outfit, and it is the trousers, and then it's pink underwear. Pink underwear. So I'll give you a bit of background on Sheriff Joe then, because my book Hard Time is the middle section. We're almost at that, but that's probably the bestseller because if my life was crazy before jail, it's about to get 10 times crazier in this jail. So Sheriff Joe Arpaio then prided himself on being America's toughest sheriff. He had 2 TV shows, Smile You're Under Arrest, where people with outstanding warrants would get awarded a prize in the mail, and they'd go to the spot to pick the prize up, and the sheriff and his goons would jump up and arrest them. And also Inmate Idol, like a talent contest. He had a website where you got to look at the mugshots of the newly arrested prisoners and vote on who was the ugliest. So, but behind that facade, it created an extremely dangerous environment. So, Nat Geo did my Locked Up Abroad episode, and they researched it, and I think around 50, 60 people died in that jail around the time I was there, over a 5 years period. And that makes that jail the jail with the highest rate of death in America. Now, people can Google this. It wasn't just the gang members murdering people, like Scott Wilson for his Onyx ring, the AB. It was also the guards murdering people, murdering mentally ill people, murdering veterans, and they even murdered a blind person. So Scott Norberg was a mentally ill guy wandering the neighborhood. They brought him in. The guards beat him up, and they're on him like a pack of wolves. And a female guard is like, stop beating him. His face has turned blue. They just ignore him. They keep beating him. The inmates are yelling from the cells, "Why are you beating him? He's already dead." And they continue to beat the corpse after he had died. Yeah, Scott Norberg. Brian Crenshaw, a blind shoplifter, partially blind, or I don't know how that works, but yeah, he was classified as blind. He failed to produce his ID for the evening meal. The guards pulverized him and put him into a coma, and he died over a month later. So the lawsuits that had been paid out at that point in time were $50 million. There was another $50 million pending. And the Phoenix New Times has done case after case and story after story on all these people who end up dying in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail. So we are now at the intake, and there's a load of guys in the line waiting to go in. New arrestees, homeless people, gangbangers, and there's some females waiting to go in as well. And the guys are kind of heckling the females. Now, in our van, the police van, 13 of us, half men, half women, the women get off first, and the men who are waiting to go in start heckling our women, like, get your tits out, that kind of thing.
Right.
Wild Woman gets out, and I could see Wild Man watching out the window. And she gives as good as she gets, but in this case, she had her head down. She was just not in the mood for it. Now, whenever Wild Man is going to commit an act of violence, one eyebrow goes back up, and one stays completely flat, and one goes all the way up, and his face stays normal. I know this because throughout my life, I've seen it. During his
Yeah.
first visit, we were at like a pool bar with bikers and that kind of thing, and a giant walked into the bar, proper like Andre the Giant, tall but didn't have the build like Andre the Giant on kind of thing. But he was big, at this chin and the teeth, the giant teeth. I'm playing pool with Wildman, and Wildman's eyebrow just goes straight up, and I'm like, "No, Peter, don't do anything, man. Come on." But he can't resist the challenge, so Wildman walks up to the giant, holds his hands out, and says, "My name's Peter. What's your name?" The giant shakes his hands and looks down and says his name. Wildman won't let go of his hand, and he's looking up at the giant, and he says, "If I were you, I'd be in the circus, you fucking freak." And Wildman's eyes are blood red. He's been up for a week on crack and meth. And the giant looks down and says, "What did you just say?" And Wildman looks and goes, "You heard me. I'd be in the circus, you fucking freak." And there's this standoff, and they're just staring at each other. And in the end, the giant backed down. He could see how crazy Wildman looked. And the giant took us outside, and he was talking to us, and he showed us his car. He had a specially made seat in the back of the car because his legs were so long. And he gave us his number. And imagine collecting debts with Wildman and a giant, but I lost his number. That was messed up there. So anyway, Wildman's eyebrows up. The women have got out. And the redneck guard's yelling at Wildman to get down off the step and step out the vehicle. And Wildman's just standing on the top step, not getting down. Now, he's newly arrested. He's been up for a week. He's been high for a week. His eyes are blood red. He looks like the devil. He's got this Viking's beard. He's chained. The guard's yelling at him to get down. He just tilts his head back and opens his eyes and goes, "You lot, disrespecting our women. I'm going to be in there with y'all in a minute. You might want to shut up." And he's just looking at him, going like this. And then he goes, "You think I won't?" And he puts his head back even further, and he opens his eyes even wider. Now, when Wildman laughs, he's so big, it's like the air moves around him. You can feel it. So he puts his head back, and his eyes are bugged, and he goes, "You think I won't?" And they all just shut the fuck up right away. He was a good man to get arrested with. So we're going through a part of it now called the Horseshoe. It's at the Madison Street Jail. This is May 16th, 2004. It's a horseshoe formation. You go in one side and you come out the other. When you're classified, they send you to whichever jail that you're going to go to. So we're going into the Horseshoe, like a little old lady behind the plexiglass. Have you got any syphilis, hepatitis, AIDS, all this stuff? She's just screaming at you. No. Then they take your belt off your shoelaces, so you can't hang yourself. And there's this series of cells, and you are sardined in these cells. There's a toilet, that's it. There's no foam. You are just compressed against the walls. If you're lucky, when you come into the cell, there might be a little space next to the toilet. Every now and then, someone's got to take a dump, and everyone's putting their t-shirts over their heads because it effing well stinks. You've got gangbangers coming in from one street, and then someone comes in from another street, and it's on site. These guys are just fighting. There's blood on the walls. The guards are coming in, dragging people out. In the corridor, they've got these what looks like medieval torture devices, restraint chairs. And they've got people strapped in these restraint chairs with spit hoods over their heads, just rocking and trying to get out these restraint chairs. It's like welcome to Dante's Inferno. We were in there for days. You don't know what time of the day it is. you only know from the wall when the heat rises against the wall that it's the daytime again. You get to see a judge. So I remember we go in and we see the judge, and he's reading everybody's charges, and $200 bond, $300 bond, $50 bond. And then we get up and he reads my charges and he says $750,000 bond. I'm like, what? And that then took it to another level of trouble. In the beginning, I was thinking maybe I can get out of this. There's no drugs in my house. Now I've got a $750,000 cash only bond. But I'm still thinking maybe that's a mistake. There's a little lady who gives you charges in the horseshoe from behind this plexiglass. So my charges are like crime syndicate, continuous criminal enterprise, conspiracy, using an electronic device to facilitate a drug transaction. And it's next to conspiracy. It says 750,000. And she's looking at it and looking at me. And I'm like, is that a mistake? And she's like, yeah, that must be a mistake. It can't be that much. Perhaps it's 75,000. So I go back to myself thinking it's 75,000. Then Wildman, somehow he's give the guards the slip again. He's knocking on the window. And he holds his sheet on. He's like, how much is your bond? And I said, it's 750,000. But she said it's probably only 75,000. He's like, no, it's not. Mine's $500,000. So I was like, oh no, I know we're in some deep crap now.
Right.
There was we're progressing through the horseshoe now. We've seen the judge. They've stripped us out. They've put us in the black and white outfit that you just saw and the pink boxers. And we're getting near the end of the horseshoe. Wildman's had to put a few people to sleep, chokeholds and things like that. People just misbehaving, causing disturbances. And people can see that we're with him. Word has spread that there's this group. They've got these high bonds. So we're kind of getting a bit of kudos as we're going on this journey through the horseshoe. Nobody's messing with us. And then we get to the last holding cell, this big holding cell, and we just absolutely stink. We've got Ladmo bags, the moldy bread and the green bologna and the grapefruits. Sheriff Joe's gone through these neighborhoods to collect the grapefruits from these rats, and he's giving them to the prisoners. And it's so bad, I'm like squeezing grapefruit peel under my armpit, trying to get my smell down. There's the little faucet thing that dribbles, and we can hardly get any water out of it. So we're stinking like wet dogs by the time we get to the end of the horseshoe. And then they classify us. So I get classified to Towers Jail. I think I'm in Tower 6. Wildman gets classified to Tower 2. We're just medium security at this point. I end up going up to maximum and then up to super maximum as well. And the rest of the co-defendants are in medium. And the prosecutors put some kind of do not house together with me and Wildman. That's why we go to separate towers. So this is the journey now. We go from the horseshoe into Towers Jail, the Maricopa County jail system, where I got to get used to the sounds of human heads bashing against walls, people's teeth just getting knocked out in front of me so many times, just bouncing around. There was a mentally old man that wouldn't stop rambling all day. I don't know what the gang did to him, but as I walked past him, blood just squirts out the back of his head. I saw a guy with his leg pointing in the completely wrong direction. The spiders, the brown recluse spiders, are putting bigger holes in people's bodies than bullets, because there were people in there who'd been shot up by the cops. One guy who was all stitched up and his organs was slipping out and all this kind of stuff. Right away, wannabes and probates from the Aryan Brotherhood come up to you and give you a charge check and give you a heart check. They find out that I'm big time in the drug, so the ABs are trying to get me to smuggle stuff in, but it ends up a race riot and mayhem, and that's I think we should save all that for the next part, Matt, because it's going to get into a whole new phase and a whole new level of madness.
Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell if you like the video. Also, we're gonna be doing another part of Shaun's story. So if you enjoyed this, please share it, leave me a comment, and please consider joining my Patreon. We put special content on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. See ya.